what makes this series so sensational? Why is this series so much more hyped than all the other fantasy romances out there? Hi, it's Stephanie. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, I make videos documenting my life as a romance writer and my journey to becoming a published author. And I've been wanting to do a series like this for a while now. I just wasn't sure how to go about doing it. But I want to take a look at some of the most popular romance books out there and figure out why that one became more hyped and more of a sensation through social media than any of the others. What is it about these books that makes them tick so well? And I want to do this through a writer's lens. So I'm going to be breaking down the blurbs, the tropes. What are these buzzy things that these series and these books have that can help us in the long run to becoming as successful as possibly Fourth Wing or whatever other books are out there. But this first video that I'm going to be doing is going to be all about the Empyrean series, which is Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and Onyx Storm, which comes out later this month. Who knows, maybe it'll already be out by the time that I am still working on this video. So the first thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to go back to the blurb, because that is the first thing that the reader gets to read about this book or this series. Obviously, it's usually the first thing that a reader sees is the cover. This is the original cover for Fourth Wing. I do not have the paperback version. I do have the special edition that came out, I believe, right around the time that Iron Flame came out. Let me grab that cover real quick. So that one is actually basically the same as the gold. It's just a little bit shinier and it's red. I actually prefer this cover over this cover, but we also don't get a whole lot of gold in covers, like solid gold. We get a lot of red covers, but there's that. And then also the first editions had sprayed edges. That was Fourth Wing. Iron Flame was just plain black. Mine did get damaged in transit. And then the special edition is just sprayed black as well. So yes, these sprayed edges are probably part of it, but I want to go deeper than that. All right, so we're gonna move over to my screen recording right now, and we're gonna go over the blurb and the genres and the tropes. Okay, so this is the version that I'm going to be reading. However, I want to go to the beginning. So this is the cover. This is the blurb that was first put out there and everything. It's the first thing that people see when they go to look up what this book is all about. So before even going into the blurb, we see that the genres are romantasy, dragons, fiction, fantasy, fantasy romance, magic, etc. And let's just go ahead and read this blurb. Enter the brutal and elite world of a war college for dragon riders. 20-year-old Violet Sorrengail was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant, living a quiet life among books and history. Now, the commanding general, also known as her toughest Talon's mother, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates striving to become the elite of Navarre, dragon riders. But when you're smaller than everyone else and your body is brittle, death is only a heartbeat away, because dragons don't bond to fragile humans, they incinerate them. With fewer dragons willing to bond than cadets, most would kill Violet to better their own chances of success. The rest would kill her just for being her mother's daughter, like Xaden Ryerson, the most powerful and ruthless wing leader in the Riders' Quadrant. She'll need every edge her wits can give her just to see the next sunrise. Yet with every day that passes, the war outside grows more deadly, the kingdom's protective wards are failing, and the death toll continues to rise. Even worse, Violet begins to suspect leadership is hiding a terrible secret. Friends, enemies, lovers. Everyone at Basgiath War College has an agenda because once you enter, there are only two ways out: graduate or die. So we're going to get to the blurb. But once I read the blurb, and most books I actually go in blindly. Most books I personally just look at tropes. Not gonna lie, a cover does a lot for me, and an author most of the times, unless it's a new author for me, I really rely on tropes. And since I read romance, tropes are a huge thing. So before we dive even more into this blurb, I want to take a look at what tropes, Fourth Wing specifically. There were a lot that showed each of the books that are out in the series, but I wanted just Fourth Wing. That way, in case you guys haven't read this series yet, there are no spoilers for future books. So, I like to see these kinds of, see, this one has both of them, so we're gonna move that. I like to look at these kind of Instagram posts because it's just, one, visually pleasing, two, it gives me a quick idea of what the book is going to have and whether it's going to fit my preferences. So these Instagram posts are showing that there's enemies to lovers, dragons, it's action packed, there's a badass female character, and it's a tournament type of style. This one shows new adult romantasy, disability representation, forbidden love, dragons, war college setting, and high stakes. So right off the bat, I know that this is going to be a book that I am going to like, mainly because enemies to lovers. Love that. A badass female character is top tier for me. Dragons. Because I feel like in the realm of fantasy romance specifically, fantasy romance and romantasy, there's not enough dragon stuff. Dragon lore, dragons themselves. Like, it is, dragons are a huge proponent of fantasy fiction, and I feel like over the past recent years, they kind of have been almost non-existent for the most part. So that is a huge draw. Them using the word romantasy is a huge draw for other people because it shows that it is a fantasy romance. Forbidden love, just, I kind of want to eat it up. Disability representation is important for a lot of people. But it doesn't say exactly what kind of disability. So I think I would like to know exactly what kind of disability we're going into, because I feel like that would help niche it up a little bit. War college setting is interesting. High stakes, I don't care if a book has high stakes or low stakes. If it sounds interesting to me, I'm going to read it. So I could do without knowing this part. So now that we have covered what the blurb is, what the genres are, and the tropes that are within it, we're going to go back to my camera and we're going to go over what I'm thinking about the blurb. This is all before reading, by the way. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that we've read the blurb and we have a little bit of an idea of what this story is about, my very first question to ask is, before reading, what stands out to make this book a sensation? And I have notes, guys. I have notes. And this is just the first question, okay? So right away from the blurb, there's War College and Dragon Riders. They're mentioned in the very first sentence. War College gives the sense that there is going to be some sort of political intrigue. And within the fantasy genre, dragons are a huge deal. So the fact that Rebecca Yarros is making them to be so integral to the story is a big draw, because you can mention that there's dragons within the world, but what Rebecca Yarros seems to be doing is making them a focal point. And I think that's a big reason as to why this book is being so sensational. Part of the political intrigue, I think, is going to come from Violet's mom, who is the commanding general, according to the blurb, where she orders her to step out from her comfortable life of where she thought she was going into the scribe quadrant for her entire life, and basically forcing her to say goodbye to the scribe quadrant and try out to become one of the elite dragon riders. And I feel like this kind of hits on a good point, because one, it gives us a little bit of insight of our female main character before we even read a sentence about her. Well, we know that she has always thought that she was going to be going into the scribe quadrant. Okay, so we know that she's more about books and history and whatnot versus action and leadership and all the qualities that you would think that a dragon rider needs. Yet from the tropes that we get from the Instagram posts, we are told that we have a badass female main character. So I feel like it's very intriguing to see this. Plus, it seems like there's going to be a lot of tension between Violet and her mom. And I feel like that's going to resonate with a lot of readers, because a lot of people do go through these periods of stages where they, rebel against their parents, or they don't get along with their parents, or they're constantly fighting, or, there's tension between parents and their kids a lot of the times. And I think that's going to resonate with a lot of readers. So I feel like that is just a little extra salt on top of a good dish already. Next, we move on to the rest of the blurb. The blurb also states that Violet is fragile and dragons don't bond to fragile humans. That sentence alone is so interesting to me. One, there's dragon bonding, which goes back to thinking that the dragons are almost characters themselves in this story, which is so interesting. And I think it's the dragons that make this so much of a sensation and a knockout right now for me without even having read it. I know that dragons are kind of like characters within this story only from social media. I'm a person who doesn't care about spoilers. Like, if I get told that, blah, blah, blah is blah, 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 or like, it doesn't bother me if I get spoiled. If I'm if I'm interested at all in a book or movie, even though I've been spoiled, I'm still going to read or watch that, Not everyone is like that. I feel like I'm in the minority when it comes to that, because I don't care if I get spoiled. If it sounds interesting, I'm still going to read or watch, whatever. So this whole dragon bonding thing is so intriguing, and I feel like that just plays into the whole reason why this book has become such a sensation. The idea of bonding with a dragon, I feel like just adds a little bit more butter. If you've read T. Taylor's 7-Figure Fiction, or the trope one that she does, I can't find my copy at the moment, you'll know what butter is. But butter is basically, the butter of a book is basically what makes it taste so much better. You add butter to veggies to make them taste better. You add butter to pastries to add some extra flavor and make them taste better. Adding butter to books goes a long way, and T. Taylor talks about that in 7-Figure Fiction, and she goes along with what universal fantasy is and how universal fantasy is that butter. And there are tons of universal fantasies, and it's not just for the fantasy genre, it's among all fiction books. So if you haven't read this yet, I highly suggest doing it. It is fantastic. But if you hear me call something butter, that's what I'm referring to. And the whole dragon bonding to a human is butter for me. The next part of the blurb showcases how difficult the process of becoming a dragon rider is. There are more humans than dragons, and the humans seem to have this fight to the death to get their respective spots of becoming one of the elite dragon riders. And I feel like it kind of gives it a feel of the Hunger Games. So it kind of like makes you feel like this could be in that kind of realm, that it is a fight to the death, and it gives that action that you're thinking of. It also introduces an enemy, and since I know that this is a romantasy or a fantasy romance, that enters the enemies to lovers trope, which is a beloved trope when it comes to romance books. The blurb also hints at the leaders are keeping a secret or keeping secrets, and that the kingdom's wards are failing. And I feel like that just goes in with the political intrigue, and it raises questions. And then the very last part of this blurb really hooks you in by saying that there are only two ways out of this, and that's to graduate from the war college or die. And there's those high stakes again. And high stakes, like, even though the trope of high stakes doesn't pull me one way or another. I can read a book that has high stakes, and I can read a book that has low stakes, and I'm still going to enjoy. It all depends on like the tropes for me. But it gives you that feel of, okay, this is what we're going into. And it's a hooky, it's a hooky type of blurb. So the next thing that we're going to go into is, this is all still before reading. After reading the blurb, I get a lot of questions that arise from reading this blurb, which inherently, when a reader is asking questions about the blurb, that means they are hooked or they are about to be hooked. So I think it's very important how this blurb has been written. Now, I don't usually read blurbs before I read a book. Like I said earlier, I look at tropes, and if it has tropes that I like, I'm going to probably pick up the book. And then, I just read it when I have time or whatever. So this is actually the first time that I'm actually reading the blurb, is when I'm dissecting it with you right now, because I don't usually go into books reading blurbs. I might know a couple characters' names from like some Instagram posts or social media posts, but it's mostly the tropes that I go into knowing what the book is essentially going to have. So I get a lot of questions after I'm reading this blurb, and I think that is so important. And I feel like that is inherently part of the reason why this series has done so well, is because this blurb that they wrote makes the reader question so many things in just a few paragraphs. Before even starting this story, I already have questions. Like, why is there a war college? I'm very confused, but I'm very interested. Why is her mother so insistent that Violet changes her course to being a dragon rider versus what Violet has grown up thinking she was going to do with her life and becoming a scribe? And the whole reason it seems like that she was becoming a scribe is because she's fragile. And these dragons don't bond to fragile humans. So in order for her to survive, it seems like she needs to go to the scribe way, the scribe quadrant. So why is her mother so insistent that her daughter go and risk her life 1,000 times more than any other person because she's so fragile? And then going off of that, why is Violet so fragile? What is it about her that is wrong? Like, I don't know. We don't know from this blurb, but that raises the questions. Another question that I got from this is, why aren't there more dragons? Why does it seem like it's the Hunger Games out here, and just to become the elite, you have to kill or be killed? Why does Xaden, who seems to be the male main character because his name was actually brought out in the blurb, why does Xaden hate Violet and or Violet's mother? Because in the blurb, it specifically states that he would kill her because she is her mother's daughter. And then another question banking off of that is, why does everyone seem to want to kill Violet because of her mom? Not just Xaden, but it seems like, yes, they want less competition, so they have higher success rates to becoming a dragon rider, but why specifically Violet, and why specifically her mother? What is her mother doing that makes people hate her so much or so fearful of her? So all of these questions are raised that I'm going to be going into this book thinking about. And that is where we are going to leave it for right now, because it's time for me to go read a couple of chapters and take down some notes, and I will be back when that happens. I get it. I really, really, really get it. So I had anticipated doing like a vlog portion of this where like you saw me reading it and it was super aesthetically pleasing, and I completely forgot to set up my camera while I was reading this. Most of the time, because I was reading this either in the car while waiting to pick up Amelia from school, and while I was reading it, I was also listening to the audiobook, so I can't listen to the audiobook and record on my phone at the same time. It like cuts each other out. But anyways, so, and then the other times that I was reading it was after the kids and Joe went up to bed, and I was in the living room on the couch laying around in my pajamas and just completely forgot to start recording. But I finished her, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So let's talk. When I first started talking about this book at the beginning of this, we looked at what the genre was, what the tropes were, what the blurb was like, and I gave my ideas as to why I feel like it was getting the hype treatment that it did. And after reading it and feeling the hype and me just wanting to talk about this book, I get it. So yes, everything that we covered at the beginning of this video, the tropes, the enemies to lovers trope, yes. The fact that the dragons played such a pivotal role in this book, and I am so happy for that. It wasn't just like there was a dragon flying in the sky. No, like they were actual characters. And the political intrigue between the world building of how the kingdom is run. Like, we don't even know a whole lot about the kingdom as of right now after reading this first one, except that, you know, there is a king, King Taurus or something like that, I think his name is. I forget his name. And there is, the kingdom is like surrounded by wards, and outside of the wards are the Griffin Riders or whatever they're called. So like that world is filled with the griffins, and then this world is filled with the dragons, and they've been like fighting or whatever. And Basgiath is the war college where they train their soldiers essentially into defeating the other kingdom or the other land, whatever. And the relationship that Violet has with her mother is so tense. It's tense. It's very tense between the two of them. It's like, does her mom actually care about her? I don't know. But like, you get that sense anyways from the blurb, because you know that they are kind of butting heads, because she was supposed to go into the scribe quadrant. Her entire life she's been training herself to get ready to enter the Basgiath as a scribe, and her mother says, no, you're not going in the scribe quadrant, you're going to be a writer. And so she is basically voluntold, essentially forced to go into a different quadrant than she had originally intended. So there's that intense, I don't know what other word to use other than intense, but there's that struggle of a relationship between them, because her mother is more of a general to her than she is to other people, it seems. And they don't have the greatest relationship. Her mother kind of ignores her and whatnot. And so what we get from that is also very intriguing. And the way she ended this book, if you know, you know. Okay? I'm not going to spoil anything. Not going to spoil anything, because if you want to read it, that's a big spoiler. But I was so happy that the twists twisted, for sure. Like, so happy. Okay, so what can we do as writers and learn from Rebecca Yarros? What can we do? Well, we can learn to use the butter in our storytelling, like Rebecca Yarros uses her butter here. The fact that she used the dragons as characters themselves, I think, set this apart from so many other Romantasy series out there. And I think that is a huge factor as to why this has so much hype. The dragons for sure has a huge impact on why this series is so hyped. Also, I was pleasantly surprised with the writing. This is my first time ever reading Rebecca Yarros, and I was nervous going into this one specifically, not necessarily her contemporaries. I haven't read her contemporaries yet, but I was nervous going into this one because I know it's marketed as new adult. And a lot of times new adults can read kind of YA. And at the beginning, like the first 50 pages or so, maybe it does kind of feel YA-ish. But once you get past that, it doesn't feel YA anymore at all. And the characters aren't YA age. They are, let's see, Xaden I know is 23, and I think Violet is 20, if I remember correctly. So definitely not young adult, definitely in the new adult category. So, but the first 50 pages or so, I can see why people might feel like it might be a little on the YA side, but it's not. It is not. And I'm very, very happy to report that once you get past the first initial 50 pages or so, it does not feel YA anymore. Okay. And yeah, it's just, I really liked it. So I was hoping to like go more into like depth of like examples of, so Rebecca does this at this section and yada yada yada, but I was so just enamored and like stuck in there. I was like hoping to take notes and annotate and everything, and I didn't, guys. I didn't. It's all blank. It's all blank. I did not get a chance to annotate or anything because I was just enjoying the ride. And yeah, I think what we can take out of this series is that it is filled with buttery goodness. And so I think by seeing how well this has done with the butterific yumminess and whatnot that is saturated in this series. So I think that this series plays heavily with seven-figure fiction and the universal fantasy list for romance that T. Taylor has put together for us. And I think it's really, really important for us writers to go and get these books, or at least look at them. I've already read this one twice. I have highlighted the shit out of it, okay? This one I have tabbed up for all the different patron saints that she talks about of these, you know, of this butter. And I think it's really important that while we are putting together our own stories is to figure out what is the butter in our stories. and really focus and home in on that, because it's the butter that is going to make it a sensation. So that is like the main thing that I learned from Fourth Wing, is that the butter needs to butter. It needs to be ooey gooey goodness. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this first video in the Reading Through a Writer's Lens series. I'm really excited for this series. The more I do them, the more I'm going to be able to really home in on like an actual template of how I'm going to go about these. But I'm really, really excited. And I want to know what books you want me to go over. I don't care if I've already read them. It's fine if I've already read them. It doesn't really matter. Whether I've read it or not, what romance books do you want me to go into the cover, the blurb, the tropes, and figure out what the butter is that makes that such a sensation? For Fourth Wing, it is for sure. One, it's a romantasy. Romantasies are all the rage lately. 2, enemies to lovers, man. Enemies to lovers, and that enemy that turns into your lover also being a shadow daddy is just a little bit of, sprinkles on top. And dragons. And not just dragons just, being on the page. Dragons actually being characters, because they have voices and personalities, and that is what the butter is for this. If you've read this, let me know how you liked it. I loved it. I am super excited to be starting Iron Flame soon. This behemoth of a book. But yeah, let me know in the comments how you liked this video. If you want to see more of it, let me know what kinds of romance books that you want me to dissect and go further into. And guys, if you haven't read these yet, I suggest doing it, because it's going to help with figuring out what is going to make your book a sensation. So if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. It does help support my channel. It lets me know that you like this kind of content, and it allows others to see this video. And if you're not a subscriber and you would like to, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate and love you forever for it. But until next time, happy writing.
I met an old man. I said, tell me your story. He took out a notepad and wrote something for me.